Join us on another adventure with Wild and Free
Interior Alaska.
Before we jump right into showing you what phase 3 of our off-grid remote cabin build in Interior Alaska looks like, I wanted to show you how we got from walls on the side of the cabin to the ends of the cabin put up before we got the ridgepole on, in a few pictures here as we are about to get started and jump right in, showing how that 30-foot long ridgepole was put in place after a very long, hard, tedious day of work and a lot of effort from our amazing friends and gracious family that put in hard work to make this happen. You're about to take a look to see exactly how we managed to get this very long 30-foot ridgepole in place on our cabin so we can move on to the next phase after this one to get a roof over our head, in theory, before the snow flies. So stay tuned and let's check it out and see exactly how this happened with a lot of live footage and lots of laughter and struggle. As you're aware now, if you've seen some of our other videos, you know that we are 100 miles from the closest major town. We are 6 miles off-road, and we can't get any big, large machinery out here, and we're a long ways from a hospital. Speaking of that, we had to be creative, use everybody's support so that we could notch this as safely as possible. It was actually a pretty trying and scary moment for all of us as we built these sidewalls first. Because nothing was supporting the top of these sidewalls, they were actually flexing quite a lot, bending back and forth as we put any weight on them. So that's why you see myself and a friend here literally securing the wall as much as we could while my husband is suspended above the air, cutting the notch for the ridgepole to sit in. So this ridgepole is going to be sitting in those notches that we are making, and it's going to overhang, and it is going to be the basis of the support for our entire roof. So a very crucial moment here in our build is getting this done and that ridgepole in place, and it was extremely difficult and involved a lot of strength, as you're about to see.
1, 2, 3. There we go. Yep. We're rigging. I'm trying. You got him. There.
Nope, okay. We got it. We're good. Maybe.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go down. You can set it down.
That's already set down.
Alright, get out there, buddy. That should be good.
Yeah, that's good.
Alright, now we gotta go in.
As you can see, this involved a lot of teamwork and a lot of strength to lift and push this in through the cabin window that we had cut and get it up onto the loft. So we had a team of friends come out here for what I like to call raising the ridgepole day. And as you can see, we had some really strong current and prior military guys that were definitely taking the bulk of the weight on this very long pole tree, if you'd rather, and they were sending it through this window, but we had to angle it up on top of the loft, which then we would run into a little bit of issues with the size of our window in order to fit it through, so we had to kind of keep adjusting the angle that we were sending it through the window to get it up there and get supported. And then there's another group of us on the loft receiving, and we were pulling it in. Now that we successfully got the ridgepole inside of the cabin, next we had the original strong group of men lift it onto the wall. And then once it's on the wall, which was a little difficult because it's much higher than my husband was, once we got a ladder so that he could actually lift it above his head and the rest of the guys could pull it up onto the edge of the wall, we had to kind of brainstorm what was going to happen from here, because honestly, we really didn't know. That's a lot of what this build was. We don't really know until we're in the situation, and then we need to figure out exactly how we're going to get ourselves one step further in the process. So perhaps you're finding yourself in a similar situation and you can see exactly what we did, or you can learn from this and decide that maybe you don't want to have to just lift up an entire tree with your brute strength and force it up the wall and into the notch that we had cut out. Hey, Carter.
Can you hand that ladder down?
Come along.
This one.
We gotta cut this now.
Just so we can notch it in.
So now that the ridgepole is up on the edge of the cabin, we need to push it up the wall, which you saw was moving earlier. To do that, we had cut off the bottom 2 logs of that end wall so that the angle was more in line with would be the shape of the roof, so that it could be pushed up 1 log at a time up the edge of the wall and into the notch. But before we moved any further getting that one side up, we needed to cut the notch for the second side so that we could lift that one up and set it in first before we carried on with the other side. That was important because that side was a little bit easier to lift up being on the loft already. So once we were able to get that in place and slide it for the 8-foot overhang that we had factored on that 30-foot ridgepole, then it left us with less overhang on the much larger, heavier side that was only going to have 2 feet of overhang, but they needed to still push up the rest of that weight log by log by log up into the original notched hole on the other end that my husband had cut. As you'll see here, every time before we would make any notches, we typically had to remove one of the log screws that was holding everything in place. So we would remove that notch. This was measured and marked ahead of time so that it would sit hopefully even across the entire cabin based on the diameter of the ridgepole at that end versus the other end, which was much larger, which is why the notch needed to be much larger as well. And then we would cut it accordingly using the chainsaw, which is quite tricky, and then reinstall the log screw again to hold everything back in place.
Back on the wall.
Huh?
The wall is leaning hardcore towards us now.
Yeah,
Lift it
because
Yeah, start lifting that side.
this ratchet's real loose.
It's gonna buckle the wall.
So we just manhandle the wall back in. This is cool. Okay, we got it. We got it.
Hold on.
No, we don't got it.
With each stage in this process of moving that gigantic ridgepole, there was always something else to consider and reevaluate and figure out what we should be doing. And as you could see, the walls, which you saw earlier, were not steady because there's nothing to support them. We had to ratchet them together to hold it as we are moving the ridgepole up the wall into place.
There we go.
Hold on.
Hold on,
We gotta strike
I don't know
our
if you
side.
live there forever.
Yeah, I feel like a joker right now.
Okay.
We're back in.
This is not
We're good. We're good.
What, being out?
Roll it.
I'm not gonna stop recording. This is great.
Someone will die.
No, everyone's gonna be fine.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Nope.
Okay.
It's just rotating and sliding that way.
Yeah, it's just rotating out of the notch up there.
Yeah, which is
Set
fine.
it back, put it back in the notch.
We know it's going.
Put it in that notch.
In case you're wondering, a few hours has passed at this point where we are still working on maneuvering this ridgepole into place. And at this point, we are finally making progress, moving this ridgepole along that end wall right there. We did successfully get it in place after a very long day of 14 hours of work, but once it was in, we were able to start cutting the end walls. Now that the ridgepole was in, it was sturdy enough for us to measure, mark, and cut the end walls so that we could figure out what our pitch was going to be for our roof so that we could order the next set of materials. Next up was working on cutting and debarking the purlins. As you can see, partial one is up. Those will be the rest of our roof supports.
Thanks for joining us.
Give us a like and subscribe and follow for our next adventures on Wild and Free.
Interior Alaska.